Now we
Okay,
have a member of the public here, so now we have to behave.
right.
No more talking about beer cans smelling bad.
Oh, is it 7?
It's
Oh,
1
that's
minute
right.
more.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me?
Can you hear us?
Very barely.
How about now?
Yep, I can hear you.
Oh, yeah.
What do I?
Yell. Hey.
Hey, Tim, can you hear us?
Yep, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
And it looks like Val Peppin has joined. She is a newly elected alternate.
Incoming.
Hi Val.
Hello, can you hear
Yeah.
me? Hello,
Hello.
can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep, we can hear you, Val.
Awesome.
Let's give it a couple more minutes, maybe. Oh, we have another maybe member of the public.
And I hope you guys don't mind, but I'm not going to put my camera on because I'm sick and I don't think you want to see me right now.
Quite all right.
Thank you.
All right, I will call the meeting to order at 7:01. First item on the agenda is roll call and seating of alternates. So just to clarify, the new board isn't seated until November 18th. So we are the old board, not the new board. So that's, I'll call the old names for roll call. Come on in. Hello. Uh-oh.
Whoa, your wing.
Like somebody got hurt. Roll call. Christina Davis, that's me, I'm present. Pam Summers.
Here.
Paul Varga,
Here,
Keith Lipker,
here.
Angie DeSanto, not present. Judy Austin,
Here.
and for alternates, we have Tim Rhodes,
Present.
present, and then Hugh and Hollid are not present. And then Val, who's joined the meeting today, is technically not, she will be alternate at our next meeting. Right? Does that make sense, Val?
Sounds good to me.
Okay. And, oh, yep.
Did you confirm when the terms start for the board members?
That's what both Janet and
Maybe
Sherry Much,
Sherry Much told you that they
November 18th.
don't have until the 18th?
Yeah. Okay, so for this evening, Tim, I will seat you for Angie DeSanto.
Very good.
Okay. Okay, so that's that. And then this evening was meant to be really less of a heavy agenda for the Board of Finance and more of a public input session. I am going to share a brief presentation that I put together just as an overview to share with the community what the current budget situation looks like. So I will jump into that, and then after that presentation, we'll open it up to public comment. Looks like we have a small group, so I think we can give people, 5 minutes or more if you we'll be able to give everybody a little extra time. So I'm going to share my screen. There it is. Okay. So hopefully people can see Town of Ashford budget outlook. Yes?
Mhm.
Yeah, okay. Okay, so I put together a similar presentation a few months ago. And so this has been slightly updated from what we knew back in, I believe it was June or July when I put together these numbers. There was when we were preparing the budget for 25-26, it looked like our ECS grant money, which is education cost sharing grant money from the state, was actually going down. But then when the budget was finally passed, it turned out that it was flat. And that ECS grant money is expected to stay flat for 26-27. So that's good news, but not great news, because most things go up in cost over time. They don't stay flat. In terms of Region 19, which we do not as a Board of Finance or as a town control Region 19, which is the board for E.O. Smith. We don't have any direct control over that, but we do have representation on the board, along with Mansfield and Willington. And they do some projections every year, and Ashford's share of the budget is projected to go up again for 26-27. Up by 6.62%. And that's a rough number. I don't think that, oh, that door is open. Hi, Bill. So that's a rough number, because they are projecting. I imagine that will go up or down, you know, once their budget comes out. But I think it's a safe assumption that our costs for Region 19 are going to continue to go up, and there are some reasons for that, which I'll get into later. I also did want to note a new piece of information that we know from the last few weeks. The new teacher contract for Ashford School was finalized, and that will start July 1, 2026. Is that right? Yeah. And that budget, as negotiated, includes a roughly 4% salary increase. So revenue staying flat, costs going up. This chart just shows what our state revenues are. Again, just wanted to give people a sense of sort of the scale. Basically, the thing to know about our state revenue is that the majority of the funding we get from the state is in the form of our ECS grant, which is meant to defray the cost of education. The other pieces that we get are less significant. I would say Town Aid Road is the next biggest chunk. There is a small new amount of funding that came with the new budget called the Special Education and Expansion Development Grant for 35,000. No, sorry. 35,000. And that I'm pretty sure is 100% for Ashford School Special Ed. Do you know anything about that? Yeah. This pie chart just wanted to give people a sense of what are the different parts that make up our budget and how do they compare in size. So roughly 3/4 of our budget as a community does go towards education, and that's both Ashford School and Region 19 are included in this pie chart. Followed by general government, which is roughly 10%, public works 7%, public safety, that is primarily the fire department funding. Planning and development, library, recreation, health and welfare are all relatively small parts of our budget at 1%. And then we have a very low amount of debt as a community, which is great. But that probably will go up slightly as we go through the bonding process for the roof. And last I checked with Sherry Susie, she said she was meeting with bond counsel in the coming weeks about converting notes into bonds or band, or I don't remember.
Until we do that, we won't know what the impact will be,
Right.
what the rate will be for us.
But I would expect, am I right, Catherine, that in the 26-27 budget, we're probably gonna see some debt payments in there?
We'll start to see those debt payments. What will happen is we have, I think it's about 40,000 a year that's left over on when we built all of this. And that's gonna go until 2033. So what we'll end up doing is pulling that into whatever we come up with for bonding for the roof.
Gotcha. So more details to come on that, but something to keep in the back of our minds that that's gonna impact 26-27 budget potentially. I do just want to point out, I did a little comparison of the numbers for fiscal year 24 versus fiscal year 15 to sort of see how these things have changed over time. They're relatively similar, but education has trended slightly down from 79% of our budget to 75%. General government has gone up slightly by about 3% over that time period. And public safety has gone up by 2%. So those are just the trends over time. These are more specifics on Region 19. I think one of the items to understand about Region 19 that's making it maybe more challenging is that the student population in Mansfield is down 22% over the last 10 years, while the student population in Ashford and Willington is down 12%. So everybody's going down, but Mansfield's gone down more significantly. And that means Ashford and Willington are likely going to have to keep making up that difference, right? Because unless Region 19 cuts substantially, they're going to have similar costs, and we're going to have to help cover that more over the coming years because of the shift in student populations. Then there's also the other elements of students that tuition into E.O. Smith. So Columbia traditionally basically just sent their students to E.O. Smith tuitioned in. They don't have a seat on the board, but they sent their students there. But as of this year, they can choose between EO and RAM, which is in Hebron. So that's a decline in revenue for Region 19, which again will have to be made up somewhere, or there will have to be cuts. Rebound. So this is another big issue that's we're going to hear a lot about this, I'm sure, over the coming weeks. So I can tell you, our assessor said, let's see, the notices, okay, Equality Valuation Services, which is the company that we use to do the revaluations, will mail the revaluation assessment notices to property owners today. So that was on Wednesday. So today's Thursday. So look in your mailboxes in coming days, there will be a notice about the reval. So what that does is it's going to impact our grand list, likely increase it because everybody's real estate in general has gone up since COVID. The grand list is going to go up because everybody's real estate is worth more money. That will then probably lower our mill rate, but that doesn't necessarily mean people's taxes are going to go down just because that mill rate is going down, because the assessed value that is the other half of the equation when we calculate taxes has gone up. So I don't know, I think last time we had our reval, which was in 2021, the average assessment increased 21%. I don't know what the average increase is this go round, but hopefully we'll know that really soon. And that will help us kind of explain it to the public and also understand what that's going to do to the mill rate. Just overall other budget factors, these are things that come up every year. Healthcare costs are going to go up, energy costs are going to go up, salaries are going to go up. There's going to be fewer volunteers at the fire department likely. We are going to have more unfunded state mandates, particularly in education, and uncertainty when it comes to federal funding is a big issue right now. I did want to note that we do have a little bit more information on funding from the new cannabis dispensary in town. The town has received about $4,600 March through July. So you can kind of figure out if that's like for a quarter, maybe it's 12,000 for a year. But there are specific areas where that money can be spent, but it's a little extra revenue, which is helpful. Then I wanted to go over briefly just how taxes are determined, because I think sometimes people go, well, the mill rate's going up, but they don't take into account, you know, the assessment and all those other pieces. So basically, in a nutshell, we figure out taxes by taking all the expenditures, we subtract out all the revenue, and then that's the amount that we have to raise via taxes. And then we take the value of the property in town, that includes homes and businesses and equipment. We derive a mill rate that raises that amount. So this chart. Sorry, I'm having trouble getting everything on the screen at the same time. Let's see. There we go. So this chart just gives a quick review of the current budget. So the one that started July 1. You can see the total cost of government services. So that's general government and education is about 17 million. And then we subtract out the revenue. I'm just gonna double check and make sure. Okay, we did have somebody in the waiting room. So then we subtract out the revenue that we have, which is about 4 million. And again, that's mostly that education cost sharing grant. There's a relatively small amount of abatements that we provide to fire department volunteers, and about $9,000 this past year. So when you take the expenditures and you subtract out the revenue, you get the grand levy, which is the amount that we have to raise from taxes. And then here we have the value of the grand list overall, and we break that out by real estate and personal property and then motor vehicle. And we have to do that because the state says we can only have a mill rate of 32.46 for motor vehicles, which makes the math a little bit more complicated. And so then we know that this past year we could raise about 1.3 million from taxing motor vehicles. And then we had to raise about 11.6 million in our taxes for real estate and personal property. And you can see the two mill rates that we have, 32.46, and then that's for motor vehicles, and then real estate personal property is 36.377. And then the tax bill for a house valued at $200,000 would be about $7,200. The thing to note about this is that with the reval, which is going to send that mill rate down, we might likely come under that motor vehicle tax cap, and then we'll have one mill rate, which will be easier just from keeping track of things. And then probably as the years, if they keep that tax cap, we'll probably go back over it in a couple of years. I did want to share here, these are the different classifications of property in our town for the grand list. So it basically just shows you pretty easily, right? The majority of the taxable property in our town are people's homes, residential. Our commercial tax base is about 4% of our total grand list. Other communities, I don't know, West Hartford is probably, a much higher commercial bar there, right? Versus more rural communities that have heavier reliance on residential taxes. And then I just, I actually ran into somebody at the turkey trot and he said to me, well, can you just lower my taxes? I'm like, sure, no problem. Well, of course, it's not that easy, right? We could cut spending, we can increase revenues, but that's a little bit out of our control, right? Because most of it comes from the state, and Governor Lamont doesn't just write checks for poor towns. Or we can increase the commercial tax base, which would help shift the tax burden away from homeowners, or we can do some combination of the above. I don't think any of these things can be done, easily or with a snap of a finger. But I did want to just sort of put them out there for folks in this setting, to sort of set the stage for public input. So I think with that, I will stop talking And, anybody who wants to ask a question specific to the presentation, feel free, or if you just wanna opine about what you really love about our town and what you can't live without, or if you wanna share your ideas on how, we could save money or be more efficient, or look at other towns that, how they do things. So I'll just open it up to, anybody, this includes board members as well, if they want to talk. So who would like to go first?
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
Do you say the name stuff? Do I say the name stuff and all that?
You can say your name, sure.
Jeff Silversmith, 95 Seacar Road.
Thank you.
I was just curious about the Mansfield drop off of 22% of their students. They're doing a ton of building at 195 and 44 down the way from there, also over on 275. Do they not do they expect that to be dinks, double income, no kids? Is there any information on that?
I think it's, I mean, this is anecdotal. I don't know this
Yeah.
for sure, but everything I've heard is all that housing is all for students, all for college
It's
students.
generally aimed at student housing with some, what's the graduate student
Mhm.
stuff,
Okay.
yeah, so I don't think they anticipate a large volume of. I don't even know what the apartment, actually, if they have like multi-bedroom units in there, I don't know.
I do know the one on 195, because I know someone who worked on it. They're like 4-bedroom units, but they're all like every unit, like it's a suite and every door has a lock. So it's really designed for college students. It's
Okay.
not,
Makes sense.
it's not
The
like. for
target
family.
audience was UConn students, yeah, and grad students.
And I know they always had a under,
I mean, I'm sure there's gonna be some influx of families, so to speak, like, you know. Because they're, especially grad student level, right, where you have an adult, so to speak, going to school who may or may not have a spouse or kids. But yeah, the target is really, if you look at even the stuff they're doing with the buildings, it's really targeted at that. Yeah. It's a valid question, though. I thought about it too. I'm like, who are all these people?
Yeah.
Well, I think
Who are they? What are they?
Who
What
are
type
they?
of people are
Yeah.
they?
it's also telling that they shut down their 3 schools and built one new one. Like, I'm
Right.
sure they looked at these numbers and went, we can't.
Well, I
have
don't know,
this
they
new
shut
school.
down Southeast for several years and then had to reopen it, so it's not the first time they've made a accounting blunder. But, yeah,
It's still didn't move them into the prison, that's all.
what's that?
It still didn't move the students into the prison, that's.
No,
all.
no. That's a whole nother thing going on with that, so.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions?
So I'll go.
Go ahead, Jane.
No nonsense. Go Jane Urban, Wormwood Hill Road. So I have a couple of thoughts. First, in case folks on the Board of Finance haven't heard before I take my board chair hat off. This is the first time, we've done a teacher's contract, well, in the 8 years I've been on the Board of Ed where we had to go to mediation. So I know some people might see a 4% increase, which you have to remember is not really straight salary. It's people get credit for their years of service as well, so it's kind of like a 2-piece to the raise. Most of our teachers, a good number of them are at the highest step in our system, so they actually don't get what we call step movement. They only get about a 2% raise. So that 4% is it's this combination of step movement as you increase your years of experience and about a 2% raise. So the majority of our teachers will actually get closer to that 2% than 4%.
Can I interrupt you and ask
Yeah.
a question? Cause I wasn't sure about this. So when we look at like next year's budget, when we get it. And if we were able to, and usually there's a slide that pulls this out and just says salaries, right? Is that gonna have 4% increase next to it, or is it gonna be more like 2%?
So it will be, they actually, our business manager and the superintendent actually go through every single employee that we have on our books. And they say, this person will be this step next year, and this will be this step, and this will be the raise that's applied to those things. And that's how that number is calculated, very specifically by the staff.
So the answer to my question is we don't know.
Right, yeah, so,
So-
it would depend, if we had someone who was at the top step who announced at the start of the January that they were going to retire. We would not budget for the replacement at that same top step, we budget kind of in the mid-level in the hopes that we don't hire someone at the top step, but with the understanding that we always look for the best candidate, so it might be somebody at the top step. To be honest, our top step and our lowest step are the, I believe this was presented in mediation, the lowest in our entire DERG, so our comparable towns. Ashford is at the dead bottom of how much every teacher makes for their step and their years of experience. So it's very unlikely we ever attract teachers at the top step when we advertise, because our salary is so much lower than what they could make at a top step at any other school, even forget outside of our, what they call our DERG, which is like, Eastford, like, it's the immediate similar towns in our area. So forget if they went to Mansfield, or Mansfield's not in ours, I don't think. But anyway, so I don't know what that number is yet, because it is very specific to the people that we have.
Gotcha.
Do you have a question?
I was just wondering, then, where did that 4% number come from?
So mediation is very interesting. There's actually a what's it called, neutral party. And we're in one room, the Board of Ed is in one room, and the teachers and union reps are in a totally different room. And he runs back and forth between the two rooms and presents stuff. And the Board of Ed's attorney presents us with information on average settlements in the state that have come in already in advance of ours. And the teachers union actually has more data than we ever have, because they get it from the state kind of teachers unions, whereas we only have access to what our attorney has access to. So essentially, the mediator looked at what we were proposing and what the teachers were asking and tried to negotiate that. But essentially where we ended up was right under what the average settlement was, across the places that had settled their contracts, so like in advance of us.
So I guess my point is that, to Christina's question, when we do the math out on the bottom line, right? This year's salary line is X, next year's salary line is Y, it's gonna be a 4% increase overall.
I think so,
Yeah.
if we had the same.
Doesn't matter, because the
Oh,
math,
if we have
otherwise
the
the
same
math
staff,
doesn't
We have
matter.
the same staff, so
Right.
that's where it.
Right,
gets
and it
weird.
could fluctuate because of that, right, I understand that, but that's, the bottom line is, for my planning as a Board of Finance member, I have to say, we're gonna have a 4% increase over last year on salary lines for the Board of Education.
Well, I believe it's
Or for
like
teachers, anyway.
6.7 or 3 point.
Good.
So it's below 4, but yes, essentially it's, yes.
I just was like, well, if you're saying 2, but this says 4, that's a big difference.
It's because of these two pieces that go into it, so.
But the reality is, again, back to Christina's question, it'll be a 4%, it will, well, 3.6, but 4%. Okay,
Whatever that
thank you.
number ended up being. Well, it's below 4, but yeah, and. I mean, I feel like our negotiations with the teachers were very positive, and they're a very reasonable group of individuals, but, to say that the Board of Education wasn't hoping for a much lower number, is explained by why we ended up at we
In
had
arbitration.
mediation for a reason.
Mediation,
And so that's where we ended up. And that in my 8 years on the Board of Ed is the first time we had to do that. Which I understand is fairly common elsewhere, but not here. So in terms of budget stuff, I was recently at a OST conference. Council of Small Towns.
Yeah.
Yes, for work, so unrelated to anything, and the state treasurer was there, as was the state comptroller. And so I couldn't resist when they were talking all about the financial state of the state and how fantastic it was. Asking them about the fact that they were ever gonna acknowledge that the reason that is because they keep pushing more and more onto the towns. And Sean Scanlon, not Steve, who's the comptroller, came up to me after and said that he was looking for towns, to participate and help him specifically with this whole property tax on residential properties as the sole source of, income for things in these rural communities. So anyway, he said that if you email him, first selectman or board of finance members could email him. He's looking for people. He said he's not afraid to do hard things. He wants to do hard things. So I would very much hope that someone in this room.
He just sent
You
a
were
letter.
here, did he?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, yeah, well, he was very nice. He
He just went.
made an effort to,
I'll send him my bar chart.
yeah. Speak to me after.
Actually, the controllers are very excited about that.
The state just passed that housing stuff just went through. Now whether Lamont signs it, so. Not picking on him because I've never met him personally, but that's one side talking to the other side and I don't know that they're actually talking, so to speak.
Well, so it's interesting because, now I'm blanking on the woman's name, but gosh, is she dynamic, also spoke. And she was talking about the early voting and how expensive it is for towns. And that's not what she pushed for. But she said, how many people in this room think early voting is too expensive for small towns? And everyone raised their hand. And she said, how many of you came and said that when this was presented to the legislature? And everybody put their hands down. And she said, because this was my position from the start. And no one else backed me up. She said, when I started to get some traction, and then all of the legislators heard how popular early voting was. And so now they have no motivation to change it at all. And so I think that you have to remember that people like the comptroller and this woman, voter woman.
So the Secretary of State?
Yes,
Stephanie
Secretary.
Donovan.
Yeah, she's amazing. They try, but
Right.
if the legislature is hearing nothing or a different message, their hands are tied. They can't lobby the legislators. That's as a state employee, they can't do that. So, so I don't know that,
No, but they can present the facts,
and she tried.
right? Well, I'm not saying that the legislators listen to it or
Well,
read it, I'm just saying they can
that's
present.
what they do remember. But anyway, so somebody reach out to Sean Scanlon, please, and tell him that you want to have Ashford involved in whatever problem-solving solutions he's coming up with.
Yeah.
And then
that sounds
finally, Belle, has her hand up.
Yes, Belle, we'll get to you, sorry.
Finally, I think, and I mean no disrespect to 50% of the public in the room with me here. I think, we should consider a little bit of something different in our town government. In that, when I worked, for the Navy, we had what we called a public works officer, who was a military, officer who ran our public works department. And I worked in the public works department. Then we had a person called a deputy public works officer, who was a civilian employee who worked second in command there. That PWO, that public works officer, had to change rotations every 2 to 3 years. And it's not the most efficient way to operate anything, which was the point of this deputy, who was a civilian employee who was there. I think our town would benefit if we had a town manager who was a paid employee, and we had a selectman who maybe rotated through, maybe stuck around for a long time. And it truly mean no disrespect, because I know the people who are in this room who have done the job, have done an amazing job. But when we have elections every 2 years and we could change every 2 years, it's very hard to maintain the momentum. There's a lot of building up and learning. There's a lot of change and cycling that I think, it would be helpful to have somebody who could commit to the position and wasn't affected by elections, even though they would have a different supervisor every election. So,
Let's talk after. Why did you clarify that for me? The other thing too is what I posed to the other selectmen a few months ago was this going to a 4-year term. Because for one thing, when you change every 2 years, you don't know what you're gonna get, and the entire board can change, well, basically. And the the continuity is broken. Takes about a year, if you're doing it for the first time, it takes at least a year of FaceTime. To get your ceilings, and even with that, there's so much to learn, and we're all laymen. I mean, if we were really doing it right, and we had the money, we would have a town administrator. And the board of selectmen would still exist, but it would be, you know, certainly the first selectman would not get the pay that they're getting.
That's the same idea.
Yeah,
Administrator.
That's
manager,
what, yeah.
Yeah,
Same thing.
exactly.
Yeah.
So, different name.
And also what you're doing is, as is in many other towns, I've looked at some other towns, is you're hiring someone who's an expert.
Right.
And to me, that would be the best thing to do. I've always said all the selectmen are laymen.
Okay, thank you, Jane. I do want to, Val's had her hand up for a while, so I do want to give
Must be
her a
getting
chance. Go ahead, Val.
Yeah, that electronic, yeah.
Hi, thanks. Actually, I had a question for Jane, actually. You had said that the teacher's salary was the lowest out of our grouping, right? How do those same towns compare with the overall school budget?
So I haven't dug into that very carefully. I do know that Willington is probably our most similar, in terms of size.
Mhm.
It's hard to compare their budget because they have two schools, so they have two, oh, did we just lose them?
No, she's
No,
not.
I'm here. I just took my hand down.
I guess we haven't done, so you wanna, so Willington, their budget is much more expensive than ours, but it's partly because they have two schools, so they have two administrative teams. Even
What
though they have the
about-
same number of students.
What about teacher salary wise? Obviously, they're gonna be more because they've been, I'm gonna make a comment that nobody's gonna like. Somebody's always gonna be at the top and somebody's always gonna be at the bottom. And I'm gonna use that argument in probably 2 months that we're at the bottom, but you have to be very careful about saying, well, we're at the bottom, so we need to strive to do more, because then if you go above Wellington, then Wellington's gonna go and do the same thing, right? Their teach, so then you go back and forth all the time, and there's no way to make it. I don't know, maybe there is, maybe you can talk to Wellington and say, maybe we should all be at the same place, but, it's
Yeah, I
very
don't think
difficult,
anyone's trying to
so.
compete.
Well, I was just
No,
thinking
I'm
if,
not- Yeah, I'm not saying
It
that.
can't be the only thing they're using as an argument.
Just trying to
So,
Yeah.
be fair, I
Right.
mean, right? But when you go into a mediation or with this professional, that's one of the things he presented us.
Right,
Like the research he had done, he
Right.
said, basically, you're trying to get a lower raise and look at the data. Like if you go to arbitration, you've lost. So back yourselves up and rethink what you think is acceptable for a salary increase.
Val, you got cut off. What did
Sorry.
you want to say?
no, that's okay. I was just thinking that maybe they do something differently, even with their administration or somehow, if they have lesser of a budget than we do, maybe there's something that they're doing that we could do as well, right? So if they've consolidated some positions or whatever, maybe that's something that we should be looking at too.
Yeah, and that is something that the Board of Ed has looked at. We did a whole thing probably 2 or 3 years ago where we looked at the number of administrators that like every other school had and the number of teachers with the student teacher ratio and kind of trying to get into all of those metrics to look at if we were, if there was something we were missing. We did combine the superintendent position with the special ed director position, which at the time when we did it saved about $90,000 a year. If you look at superintendent salaries right now, we're saving a lot more than that because superintendents are getting paid a lot and there aren't that many of them. They're retiring like crazy and nobody wants the job. So yeah, I mean, we always look and we always could look more.
I would just add, I think Val, your question is 100% dead on. And if you want to volunteer to help me to compile this data, I would love to volunteer. 'Cause I'm excited to do it. I will say it is very, very, once you, because all the budgets are public, right? So you go in and look at every town and line by line. The challenge is everybody does a little different. So it's very, very hard to compare apples to apples, even looking at what in Mansfield, which I did in depth. I started to put together a spreadsheet and I can't find it right now, but trying to figure in even Region 19, trying to make apples to apples comparisons of like superintendent, well, ours is superintendent and special ed, and some people have a special ed coordinator, but they call it something else. Some people have a, assistant principal, some people, it's very, very difficult to do that analysis, even though I do think it's really would be incredibly useful if we did. I just think it just takes a lot of time to really, and it almost takes calling up some of these districts and being like, well, who is this person and what do they do? But there is probably some insights to be gained from doing that. It's quite an undertaking. The state does have reports that, try to give you apples to apples comparisons. And you can do a little bit of sort of a quick look and go, okay, where are we in comparison to some of these other towns? But again, I think a lot of it gets kind of lose the nuance, knowing 2 buildings versus 1 and all those kinds of things.
All right, cool. Thank you.
One of the most effective things we find to look at is what the state determines as your pure per pupil cost. Cause that kind of averages everybody, but again, it doesn't take into some of these considerations like 2 buildings or whatever, but when you look at that, Ashford is on the lower end, it's not at the bottom, of our per pupil cost, and there's other factors that go into that too, like towns like ours have higher transportation costs, cause we gotta bus everybody so far. Towns that don't do as much busing or have shorter bus routes, it's, even that's not quite apples to apples, but it is a helpful metric. Alright, now I'm really quiet.
All right, other comments?
How is Wellington's budget for education compared to ours? They may have more students.
They have a handful of more students and their budget is maybe 500,000 more than ours, I think, maybe 1 million more. We're at like 8.5 and they're like at 10. And they're really struggling because of their 2 building situation, and one of their buildings is over 100 years old. And they need to, they're in a very difficult situation.
But they also have, the UPS facility,
Right.
they have the truck stop, and they have, so while their budget is higher, their tax burden for
Their
residents
commercial
is different.
property tax is about 11% of their budget versus our 4%.
Right.
There you go.
So
That's
it's a
it
little
right
over,
there.
almost triple, a little over double, however you want to look at it.
So our basic challenge is the revenue stream coming in. We don't have enough. We're relying so much on, homeowners,
Correct.
basically.
Correct, that's what I was saying to Stephen, really had the opportunity, I said, in towns like ours, it's all on the residents. We don't have the infrastructure or a location to even create a downtown. Where could we do that in Ashford? I would love it if we could, but where do we have a water supply? Where do we have the property? Where do we have any of it to make something like that? I would love nothing more for us to attract businesses and do better than in cannabis dispensary that represents Walmart in yearbook. I think that would be my dream, but it doesn't seem like there's a feasible option. But I do wish that, I think some of the people who are the loudest, if you make the mistake of going on our town Facebook page about the rural nature and how much they want to preserve it, are also the ones who are complaining about their taxes going up. And you can't, the sad reality is we need more businesses and I think we can do that in a way that doesn't ruin the rural character, but it's a challenge.
But those were, oh, sorry.
No, I was just gonna say, to that end, I wish we had made a list of those people who said that I love the rural character so much, I would be willing to pay more taxes.
Yeah, it's Jeff, it's on tape somewhere, I'm sure. We should
Sure.
go back and watch
Yeah,
out,
it's about 8 hours of tape.
figure it out,
Go for it.
because I agree with you. I wish I would have wrote their names down, but.
I'd like to point out that even though Wellington has a lower tax rate and, you know, has businesses that are able to contribute, their budget failed multiple
Yeah.
times.
Right.
Correct.
And one of the most contentious things was about a school,
Right.
building a new
Right.
school.
But that, again, that's a problem too, because as Jane said, like, or Christina, like, they're in a tough spot because they have two buildings that are both very old.
Right.
And I think that they're running into the problem of, and I don't know, I didn't follow it that closely, but people are against that whole new school thing for whatever reason. The truth is it's gonna have to happen. I'm sorry to tell them that, right? I mean, we just had to put a roof on ours. At some point, you don't have an option. And I don't know who tried to explain it to the public there. Like I said, I wasn't involved, but I think that they need to do a better job, or the people need to do a better job of listening. You know, when, you know, or like Jane said, the people that are the loudest, if you will, is the same ones that are loudest about the other problem too. And I was like, as somebody who grew up here, I look at the businesses that are no longer here. You know, so not only are we not attracting new ones, but we've driven a lot of them away. And I'm not saying same problem. It's the same kind of that one, well, not one group, but that group that barks the loudest about the rural character, but then, you know. I don't have an answer to that part. I already tried I tried, so.
I just wanna, ask folks that are on Zoom, there's, Jeff, and Noah. I don't know if you guys had anything you wanted to add. You're on mute, so if you wanted to speak, you would have to unmute yourself.
I'm all set, Christina, thank you.
Oh, okay, great. Oh, and there's Jeff and Noah, okay. All right, well, I'll assume that they're not interested in speaking, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say to Paul's point about like driving out the businesses that we previously here. If we're at 93% residential tax, 7%, the rest of the makeup there. Was it, and I'm saying, I don't expect you to know this, but did we know what that percentage was back then? And was it the tax burden that pushed them out?
I don't think so. I don't believe it was the tax burden. You know, and I can say as a business owner, previous business owner, it was not the tax burden that drove us.
We're talking about that.
Yeah, exactly, right?
Uh-huh.
It wasn't that. It was the lack of, I guess, participation from the townspeople, right? It's just the lack of traffic. So you can't stay in business if you don't have people come into the business. So, you know, there's a point where you're like, well, look, what are we doing? We can't do this. It's not working, you know? Some of it is because you're competing with the quote, big box retail stores, whatever that, in that case, Home Depot, Lowe's, whatever, Tractor Supply. The other thing is that you don't have like the daytime traffic, so to speak, in Ashford, because we're basically a bedroom community.
Right.
Right, so obviously we adjusted our hours. I looked at the data and we made did some things, but it's still just at some point you just gotta be like. It just doesn't work.
It's, if I may, but, it's like when we, survey the town for what services would you
Right.
want, what businesses do you want? And everyone says, oh, a grocery would be great, things like this, or, you know, let's put a doctor's office here or
Right.
something. But you have to realize, even as an individual, that those people need to be supported. And our small community, even as, you know, whether it's the bedroom is correct or not, I agree with you.
Right.
It doesn't support that. I was thinking about even going back to the warehouse situation, the text amendment for the warehouse and all too. People saying, let's put an Aldi's up there,
Right.
let's put a Trader Joe's. It's about 25,000 people in that Stafford, Wellington.
Right.
Or Union, that would travel down the highway to get there. Does that meet their business plan?
No, it does not.
It doesn't.
Nor do you have the socioeconomic average salary for
And
it.
that's part of the problem though, is you need to attract two things. You need to attract the people into the business, the warehouse, right? So you have the employee side of that, whatever that business is. Manufacturing is a great example, because now the workers come to that location, and then while they're there, they want to go to lunch, they need to have a meeting or whatever. Or maybe they decide, hey, I want to move closer. I'm not saying I want to move into town, but they might want to move closer. So now you start attracting those people, and then your other businesses can start to thrive again. Your restaurants, your bar, whatever it may be, your grocery store. You might have a small grocery store, because now when somebody leaves work, oh, hey, I need to pick up this, and I'm driving right by this location, and those people, the Dollar General people who do those numbers are like, oh, look, if we put a building right here, we'll have 25 or 50,000 people go by, and that's our metric, whatever it may be. It's not as simple as, like you said, we want a doctor's office. Well, that's great, but how many people in this town are gonna go to that doctor? There's only 4,000 and change of us to begin with. And I already have a doctor. Why would I?
And the nature of where we are, and again, this is not trashing Ashford, but the nature of where we are, you are 20 minutes from anything.
But,
And you are 20 minutes from 3 big Ys.
exactly.
That type of thing, and if you are headed out toward Hartford and Tolland, or if you're headed toward North Wyndham, or you're headed out to Stafford to do whatever it is, you're going to do, business, family, whatever, you're gonna stop there. And do
Yes,
those
the
things.
revenue side is a very complex problem, but you have to start somewhere. As growing up, there were 3, maybe 4 restaurants, if you will, right? So bars, places you could get food and or drink. Now, there's 1.5, as I would say, right? So what happened? A lot of it was, back then, nobody went 20 minutes. They didn't want to go 20 minutes. Now going 20 minutes, I have people ask me, yeah, why don't you go to Sturbridge to go out to dinner? Why would I drive it? I don't want to drive to Sturbridge to go to dinner, right? I don't want to drive 20. And I live in the middle of nowhere on purpose, but I would like to have something close by. I try to support those places. But yeah, it's a very complex.
Another aspect of this is if we want to attract businesses that we think could thrive here, is offer a tax incentive.
Right.
First year or 2, you don't pay taxes. Anything that basically we're supporting that business.
To get them to come
Getting their
in.
foothold in.
Right, and then, and to Jeff's question, that I don't think the tax was a tax, I don't think, I can tell you from my business, it wasn't, the tax wasn't the problem, right? But eventually it does become a problem, and the tax rate is so high that if I need to move in here, if I look at Ashford or Wellington, where I'm gonna put my business, I'll be like, well, let's see, yeah, if I go to Wellington, it's 10 mils less, that's a big difference.
And some people, I know I was like this too, until it really dawned on me when it comes to the budgeting process. When someone moves into your town, or you give them a tax incentive to move to your town, you're not planning on their taxes for that year anyway.
Correct.
Right, that's why it's not a.
So it doesn't, it's right then and there.
Correct.
It's depending how long you make that tax-free system
Yeah.
for.
And the thing is, you have to figure out what kinds of businesses our people will actually use. And
Apparently they
then,
use
and
the
attract
cannabis
those.
store.
Hi there, I don't see a whole lot going on.
I
It
never see
depends. It's
anything.
actually, the other day, it was like.
I've seen more and more cars. That 4,000 is gonna grow.
Certain parts, yeah, certain times of day, I suppose.
It just hurt my shoulder now.
Bill, you're awfully quiet back there. Did you want to share anything?
I'm just listening.
Okay. I do want to contribute as a public citizen, just sharing my perspective. And it's going to sound similar to what Jane said, and I promise we did not coordinate this. But I also really would love to see our community really investigate a town manager or town administrator position. I think not only for the reasons that were stated, but also just from a public participation standpoint. I don't see a lot of younger people, unfortunately, stepping up. And I know I speak to, Janet Bellamy, and I'm sure on the Republican side as well. it is hard to find candidates, and it's getting harder and harder every year, and I just think it would be an easier sell for people to participate on the Board of Selectmen if it was more of a volunteer, less time consuming thing, because that work could be taken by someone who is paid a town administrator. And I just think, I think the nature of running a town is becoming more and more complex, you know, it used to be.
Oh, absolutely.
I'm sure, maybe a less difficult job, but I think today it's a very challenging job. I'm not telling you anything you guys don't know. And there's an awful lot to keep on top of, and it's probably a job you could spend 80 hours a week doing. And that's not realistic. So I do think a town administrator or town manager is really something we should seriously consider. And I don't think the math is maybe as bad as you might think off the top of your head. One more comment, Catherine, then I'll let you chime in. And the other piece is that bar graph of our reliance on homeowners and our lack of commercial tax base. To me, that's the name of the game, and people come and they complain about taxes. And the reality is there's really not a whole lot we can do. Unless we cut significant numbers of people from across the board. There, and that will impact services, and that will impact, you know, quality of education, all those things. The only other way to make an impact on our taxes is to grow that commercial tax base. And we do have a highway running through our town, and it is a good location to put a business there. So I think we have to, as leaders in the community, when those opportunities come up, raise the issue of the grand list and what the impact is, and try to advocate. And I know I will do that. As I've been in this role, it's what we need, some more commercial tax money, or we're just gonna keep paying very high amounts of taxes. It's just is what it is. All right, so that's my soapbox. I will step down.
What I want to say is, Northeastern Council of Governments, NECOG, has put in place, something where you share town administrators. They have a town administrator role being shared by 3 or 4 towns. One of the awkward parts of that is when and they're supposed to help with things like budget and whatever. Well, guess what? We all do budgets at the same time. So I sit on the board, I attend those meetings, and so I'm continuing to look at what they're offering with that and some other services that we can use and kind of offload some of what we have to do. But it has to be at a good price, you know, it's gotta be equitable. We also looked at, even for a tax collector, we looked at a regional approach. We used regional approaches for a number of things. And that's worked out really well. All of the people who work in our land use department, except for the clerk, are all, they're all contracted as part of the regional programs or companies. So I'm continuing to look at that. We're always looking for savings every single day. You know, people may think that we only do it at budget time, but I know the school does the same thing. It's, you know, wow, we can save a few bucks here, that kind of thing. The town administrator thing is a big deal. And you really need to have somebody physically present. It's not someone you could farm in a day a week if you really want that role to have the impact that we want it to have. So, and you have to pay them.
Right. But it could also be an investment
I feel it's an
that
investment.
would then
Absolutely.
position us to grow that commercial tax base. Because having someone in that role who has experience in, you know, municipal management, and economic development,
Yeah.
they're gonna be better positioned to help the town grow.
You just mentioned the term that was just going through my mind too, is that not that, I'm not trying to point fingers at anyone, because I know that they're very dedicated, those that are on it, but our Economic Development Commission is a club. I mean, only because they can't get a quorum, they can't
Right.
meet, they can't do anything, and they, again, it feels like they're, as volunteers, they have no, and I hate to use these terms, I don't mean accountability, I mean, they just haven't been able to move forward at all. Because as you said, no one wants to volunteer to be on that. And here we're sitting with a bunch of people that have, some good ideas and things like this. And I'm sure there are lots of people out there with good ideas, but they just don't want to raise their hand and become part of the solution. And, go out and speak to the realtors, go out and speak to the developers and things like this, and, get that ball rolling here. Whether they're a paid town manager or I'm not saying make them a paid committee or anything like that, obviously, but they need support, we really need to get that going, because it's just in the doldrums right now, it's not going anywhere. And Marty and Mike, if you're on, I know you work very hard, to what you're able to do.
I guess my last comment is it's a little bit of a negative, which is I really worked hard to notice this meeting, gave everybody notice, sent out emails, got it in the Citizen, got it on Facebook. And the people who, by the large part, the people who are here are the people who are always here. And so I appreciate the people who are always here, but I was really hoping we would get some new voices.
It's not a negative, Christina, it's a sign of what Jeff was just talking
Right.
about, and what we all face, no matter what, whether it's Board of Selectmen, Board of Finance, Planning and Zoning, Board of Ed, we all have the same problems.
But I would just know that I'm gonna keep this in the back of my head for when we get into budget season, and I'm gonna say, where were you in November?
We kind of can't do that,
A tip from the POCD, offer pizza.
Oh,
Yeah, there you go.
Well,
There you go. Yeah, that did kind of work, didn't
we're
it?
missing pizza.
We had 50, 60 people in town.
Yeah, that was a good turnout.
And it worked out really well. We did do a lot of advertising. We did a couple of things in the Citizen. We also put it out on the website, things like that.
Which, I mean, she did, like, it was,
Yeah.
yeah.
But you
and that-
really need to give people like 60 days in this town, and then beat them over the head over and over and over again. What is that, the Navy?
Don't worry, well,
Go once, tell them again. Tell them again.
sometime in March or April, there'll be people in here, because we're gonna talk about something, whether it's Board of Ed or whatever. And like you said, and it'll be like, well, we asked you to come and so we can talk about it, and.
I think too, we have a lot of people that are struggling in town. A lot of people that have been struggling with their jobs, a lot of people who have developed a form of apathy. They don't like what's going on federally, they don't like what's going on at the state level. And it's just, they may feel like it's pushing a boulder uphill to try and do anything. And again, one of the things, even with Zoom meetings, at least people can see what's going on here. Where before, more people lived and worked in town. So they would come, they would be more engaged. But those times have changed. It's very hard to get people enthused about it.
Mhm.
We do have some younger people that are coming into the fold, so to speak. And have volunteered for the different boards and whatever. But it's really terrible trying to encourage them to come and participate.
But I feel like it's not even just the boards and stuff though, like we've put on different activities for like the 250th, right? And you get 8 people. Like, what is that? Like, no, people complain that there's nothing going on or there's nothing to do, but then when you do something, nobody shows up. So it's not even just the boards, it's just overall, it's a very odd thing going on right now.
Well, keep trying, Val.
We'll keep trying. That's right.
All you can do.
Yeah. One other thing I wanna just leave everybody with is the reval. And please talk to your friends and neighbors about the reval, because people freak out. These letters are going home and people are gonna get a letter that says the value of their home has just gone up by I don't know how much, and they're going to lose their minds. And please try to calm them down. I will say the Q&A that our assessor sent is very good. But one of the questions is like, how are taxes figured out? And it includes our current mill rate. So then people are going to see this new assessment and then they're gonna do the math with the existing mill rate, and that's gonna be
Perfect.
astronomical.
We solved the budget problem
Right.
right there.
Yeah, we'll just skip the mill rate left. But just, we're going to have to remind people that that mill rate is going to go down as a result of this increased grand list. So it's not as scary as it might seem. And so just
But-
please mention that.
Yeah, but I mean, it is like, I mean, I think that's part of my thing about the whole commercial space is the other day I was looking at my mortgage statement, which I guess I never look that carefully at. When it comes, I just pay it. And I was like, part of my whole retirement thing is having no mortgage. And I've lived in my house now for 15 years. And my monthly payment into my tax escrow account is now more than my mortgage part. So I was like, it turned to my husband and I was like, we can't retire here. Like, we're gonna have to move before we retire to somewhere with lower taxes, because I mean,
You're
I'm
not,
nowhere close to retirement, and that's more than I'm paying in my mortgage right now,
you're
so.
not wrong. That's a huge problem.
Yeah, I mean, it's not sustainable, for anyone in this community, and, especially with the number of people we have who have significantly lower incomes, and, I mean, it's just. Yeah, you live in your house, the value goes up. And then guess what? So do your taxes. Like, it doesn't even matter if nothing else is changing. It's scary and frustrating, and this is where I was gonna retire, but not anymore.
And there's two schools of thought on that too, because yes, the value of my home is going up. That will be great if I'm looking to sell.
Right.
I'm
Correct.
very, very happy if I'm looking to sell. If I like it here and I wanna stay here, that's what I'm paying for.
Mhm.
I'm paying for the enjoyment of my home, the community, of where I live. And people lose sight of that.
But if you can't, I mean.
If you financially can't afford it, like
Right.
when you retire,
Right,
because, I mean, even if your mortgage is paid off, if you're like Jane said, if your actual mortgage amount and your taxes are higher than your actual mortgage amount. It depends on the home you have, obviously, but still, like, at some point. Like she said, she expected to have no mortgage, no debt, and now they know that they're forever, like,
right.
and it's not, I mean, that's quite honestly, that's 100% valid concern, and it's happening.
It is not unique to Ashford though,
No,
because there was actually an article I read probably like 6 to 9 months ago. Noting that phenomenon of the tax bill being higher than the mortgage payment, and it's in rural communities and it's happening.
Yeah.
Mostly across the Northeast.
Yeah.
The communities they looked at, a lot of them were in like upstate New York, that are places that are very similar.
right.
And so unfortunately, it's not unique to us. All right, any other comments?
Jane, just a couple.
Yeah.
Excuse me. Christina.
Oh, that's okay. You can ask Jane permission too.
I learned a long time ago, because I was approached some 40 years ago by a first selectman and said, Bill, why don't you get involved? And I think one of the things that is a challenge for us, but also sort of an obligation for us, is to realize you do outreach. There's people out there that I think we could get involved just by approaching them, and that's not always the easiest thing to do. But I think it takes that extra little push. So just keep in the back of our minds, for those of us that have been involved for years and years. Sometimes we kind of take for granted the people that are volunteering, but there is a reserve of people out there. Whether they're new to our school, or they have young children that are now going to the school and looking at things in a different way or whatever. A lot of it is just asking and getting people. About economics and attracting commercial business. One of the things that is a big challenge for us here, and sometimes it kind of misses us, is that the town of Ashford is almost 100% within the Willimantic watershed. And we're very limited by the nature of that and what we can do in town to attract businesses. Another thing that is a factor in our economic development is the high number of non-taxable properties we have in town. Just look at the camps themselves that we have. The Salvation Army, the Boy Scout camp, the Hole in the Wall. We look at them as a blessing in one way, which obviously they are, but that's also land that is never going to be taxable. Then you add to that the state property that's in town with our forest, Joshua's Trust. Those are all things that add into the formula of what makes it even tougher for us to attract businesses and try to take the burden and change the formula of our tax base to help out with our residential taxes. It's a challenge.
And I looked into this a few years ago, the non-taxable places that we have in town, camps, etc., make up about 33% of our land. So that is truly a challenge.
Yeah. Again, one of those little variables that don't get captured,
Right,
the data when you look at.
right.
Yeah,
Yeah, so 70% of the property is being used residential, business, whatever it may be, agriculture. And we, because we all live here, are paying for 100% of that, right? So 30+% of those.
but those open areas, undeveloped areas, or, the camps, even though they're developed, that's part of what makes it great to live here. That's the other thing,
So
I love the fact that the Yale Forest is here and I can go hiking and all those things. That's part of what we all enjoy, so. Bit of a catch-22.
And just one other thought, many boards of selectmen over the years, we've discussed the potential and the thought of a town manager or an administrator or whatever. We've also discussed, as Catherine had mentioned just a couple of months ago with our board, and we've done it on previous boards. The first selectman is elected for a 2-year term. We kind of jokingly say for the first year, you learn the faces and the characters and the names, you sign all the signature cards. And then the second year, you're making up your mind whether you want to run and go through that again. So really, it makes sense. And at some point, I think we have to bring it to the town and get input of a 4-year term for selectmen. And the board of selectmen, because too much time is taken up with, are you going to stay, are you leaving, or whatever the terms. If you look at your terms, there's 6 years. And part of that is because of continuity, and that's very important in the running of a town. With the town manager, over the years, we've looked at things and the cost that's involved with that. And some people have brought up, well, you're gonna attract somebody who's retired. That's gonna be with you for a short, you may get them for less money, they're gonna be with you for a short period of time. Or you're gonna attract somebody that's just out of school, that's just got the degree. They're gonna come in and start at a lower salary and get 2 or 3 or 5 years under their belt and be offered by a town like a Mansfield or a Willimantic or a much larger town, someplace in the country, double the salary that we can afford to pay them. So those are all things that you look into the balances of the pros and cons of that sort of thing, and it is a challenge. And I don't have the answer, but I know a lot of this stuff we've looked at for many, many years.
Any other comments? All right, I'm going to say that our public input session is done. I am just gonna briefly touch on, so our next meeting is November 20th. And so that will be the new board, which is basically the old board, but with some new alternates. So Val, Rob Chernick, yeah, and then we have a vacant slot for that. We will have a lot of business to go through at our next meeting because we have to approve our meeting dates for 2026. I'll probably share a draft of the budget calendar that I've distributed to Catherine and others as well. So I don't think that'll be ready to be approved at our next meeting, but we can at least take a look at it and see if we have questions or comments or edits. We also can discuss officers on the board, if anybody is interested in, what's that noise?
I thought you were laughing.
Yeah, that was me laughing. What's that? Yes.
So with the.
Exactly what that was.
With the new,
All volunteers.
with new members, we should open it up to, folks, if anybody wants to throw their hat in the ring for chair or secretary. So we'll have that on the agenda. Don't all raise your hands at once.
No one for chair.
And, I think that's it. The meeting dates, budget calendar, and, officers, I think, are the big things. So that'll be our next meeting, which will be next week, because of Thanksgiving, we had to do it. So two weeks in a row. And with that, I will, entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make the motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Bye.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, everybody on Zoom. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You too.
Bye.
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 Thanks, Christina.
Thanks.